The tourism boards sell you sweet tea and magnolia trees, but nobody mentions the road outside that porch might dead end into a cornfield for no reason. By the end of this list, you're going to question whether anyone south of the Mason-Dixon line ever owned a ruler. Number 1. Let's start gentle, with Georgia. A normal city grid assumes that if a street is named Peachtree, there's exactly one of it. Atlanta has roughly 71 streets with Peachtree somewhere in the name, scattered with no discernible pattern. GPS systems reportedly weep. Who decided that thoroughness meant repetition instead of creativity? Number 2. Mississippi has small towns where the speed limit changes 4 times within a single mile, dropping from 55 to 25 with zero warning signage. Locals know, visitors do not. It's less a traffic law and more a quietly profitable ambush. Number 3. In parts of rural Alabama, county roads can change names at the county line without so much as a heads up. So the road you've been following for 20 miles simply ceases to exist on your map and reappears under an entirely different title. Could you imagine being told by your own GPS to perform a U-turn into a county that insists your road was never real? Number 4. Louisiana stacks a different kind of confusion on top. Its parishes function like counties everywhere else, except they're called parishes, and several share near-identical names with towns inside entirely different parishes. A layered geography puzzle, engineered to humble anyone who assumed a county and a town wouldn't share a name by accident. Number 5. Let's pivot categories because South Carolina has a town ordinance technically restricting the hours during which you may legally honk a car horn near certain residential blocks. A rule born from genuine neighborly frustration, sure, but enforced with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for actual emergencies. Somewhere, a city council spent real meeting time on this. Number 6. Back to roads. Tennessee mountain counties are famous for switchback routes never repaved to modern standards, meaning a 10-mile trip as the crow flies can become a 45-minute crawl around hairpin turns. Would you ever move somewhere just up the road requires a full tank of gas? Number 7. North Carolina has a scattering of towns where 2 separate streets, blocks apart, share the exact same name with no directional distinction. No north, no south, just 2 main streets that aren't connected and aren't aware of each other's existence. Mail carriers have apparently developed something like a 6th sense just to survive their routes. Number 8. This next infrastructure fail defies basic physics, or at least basic drainage planning. Several small towns across the Mississippi Delta were built on flood-prone land without adequate elevation grading, so a moderate rainstorm can turn Main Street into something resembling a canal within the hour. The forecast doesn't say rain, it says good luck. Number 9. Florida deserves its own category, but let's start small. Entire Central Florida neighborhoods were platted decades ago with road grids never actually built, so official maps still show streets that exist only on paper, weaving through undeveloped scrubland. Who keeps reprinting maps for roads nobody intends to pave? Number 10. Arkansas has counties where the county seat isn't the largest town in the county, a quirk that wouldn't matter except that all the administrative buildings, courts, and licensing offices are clustered in a town smaller than the one 15 minutes away that actually has, people. Convenience apparently lost that vote a century ago, and nobody's revisited it since. Number 11. The town planners somehow get even lazier here. A handful of Georgia municipalities have traffic circles installed at intersections, with absolutely no yield signage explaining who has the right of way, leaving the rule of the road to a kind of improvised eye contact diplomacy between drivers. Have you ever seen a local law this unwritten? Number 12. Alabama has a scattering of dry counties, meaning alcohol sales are restricted or banned outright, sitting directly next to wet counties, creating a patchwork where crossing an invisible line changes what's legal to buy, with zero signage marking the actual boundary on most rural roads. You just have to know. Number 13. South Carolina's barrier islands are often connected to the mainland by a single bridge each, meaning an entire community's only hurricane evacuation route is one 2-lane span built decades before anyone seriously discussed storm intensity. The backup plan is hoping the bridge holds. Number 14. Let's talk bizarre laws again. Mississippi technically still has an antiquated law on the books regulating profanity in public that's rarely enforced but has never been formally repealed, meaning it exists in a legal gray zone where, on paper, an argument in a parking lot could theoretically violate municipal code. Nobody's been arrested for it lately. Nobody's erased it either. Number 15. Louisiana's road numbering system can assign the same highway number to multiple, entirely separate roads in different parishes, meaning Highway 1 in one part of the state has nothing to do with Highway 1 3 hours away. And somehow we're still just scratching the surface of how this state numbers things. Number 16. Tennessee has small towns built directly into mountain hollows, where cell service simply doesn't reach, meaning emergency dispatch can take significantly longer, not because of distance, but because callers can't get a signal to dial in the first place. Could you imagine an emergency response time dictated by topography instead of training? Number 17. North Carolina's Outer Banks include stretches of Highway 12 routinely swallowed by shifting sand dunes, requiring emergency excavation just to keep the only road open. A state highway that occasionally needs to be dug out like a stranded car. Number 18. Arkansas has a town where the local ordinance requires businesses to maintain hitching posts for horses, a regulation written for an era of transportation that hasn't been common practice in roughly a century, yet remains technically active law. Somewhere, a clerk still has to check a box confirming compliance. Number 19. Florida's Panhandle sits in the Central Time Zone, while the rest of the state runs on Eastern Time, meaning a single state has a literal internal time zone border that splits some counties down the middle. Drive 40 minutes and your meeting either starts in an hour or already happened. Number 20. We're halfway through, and the town planners somehow get even lazier. Georgia has rural intersections where four-way stops were installed without ever repainting the actual stop lines. So the legal stopping point and the visible stopping point are two entirely different spots on the pavement. Enforcement, somehow, still happens. Number 21. Alabama has counties bisected by rivers with no bridge crossing for 20 or 30 miles in either direction, meaning two towns practically within shouting distance across the water are a 45-minute drive apart. Could you imagine waving at a neighbor you can't legally cross to? Number 22. Mississippi has a scattering of towns that still operate on a blue law framework restricting certain retail sales on Sundays, a holdover regulation that occasionally trips up businesses that didn't realize the rule still applied to them specifically. Ignorance of the law, apparently, is not an excuse, even when the law itself seems to have forgotten it exists. Number 23. South Carolina's coastal towns frequently lack adequate stormwater drainage infrastructure for modern rainfall intensity, meaning a sunny day flooding with no rain at all, just high tide pushing water up through the drains, is a regularly documented phenomenon. The ocean, essentially, just lets itself in. Number 24. Louisiana has parishes where road elevation was never properly engineered against subsidence, the gradual sinking of land, meaning roads built level decades ago now dip and pool with standing water during ordinary rain, no storm required. This next infrastructure fail defies basic physics. The road is quite literally sinking faster than anyone's repaving it. Number 25. Tennessee has a town where the local ordinance technically restricts whistling on certain streets after a designated hour, a rule rooted in some long-forgotten noise complaint that nonetheless remains officially on the books. Would you ever move to a town where humming under your breath might be a technical violation? Number 26. North Carolina's mountain roads include sections with grades steep enough that loaded trucks regularly lose brake function, prompting the installation of runaway truck ramps, essentially gravel pits angled uphill specifically to catch out-of-control vehicles. The infrastructure solution to bad road planning was, apparently, more road. Number 27. Arkansas has counties where 911 addressing wasn't standardized until relatively recently, meaning rural homes were identified by descriptions like the house past the old mill, well into an era when most of the country had numbered addresses for decades. Emergency responders had to memorize landmarks like folklore. Number 28. Florida has entire planned communities built atop limestone bedrock riddled with sinkholes, meaning homeowners occasionally wake up to their backyard quietly relocating several feet underground overnight. Who actually approved building neighborhoods on ground known to swallow itself? Number 29. Georgia has small towns with traffic signals still running on outdated fixed timers rather than responsive sensors, meaning a driver can sit at a red light at 3 a.m. with zero cross traffic for a fixed 90 seconds out of sheer bureaucratic stubbornness. The light doesn't care that you're alone. Number 30. Alabama has a documented case of a road sign pointing drivers toward a town that no longer exists, having been absorbed or abandoned decades ago, yet the sign was never removed or updated by the department responsible for it. And somehow, we're still just scratching the surface of how many ghost town signs are quietly still standing across the region. Number 31. Mississippi has counties where property lines were originally surveyed using outdated, imprecise methods, creating boundary disputes that occasionally surface generations later when modern GPS surveying reveals a fence or even a house sitting partly on the wrong side of a line drawn over a century ago. Have you ever seen a local law dispute this delayed? Number 32. South Carolina has small island communities accessible only by ferry, with schedules that haven't meaningfully changed in decades despite population growth, meaning residents plan entire days around a boat that may or may not run on time. This next infrastructure fail defies basic physics. Sorry, basic logistics. But it might as well be physics at this point. Number 33. Louisiana's levee systems, built to hold back rivers and protect towns, were constructed in phases over nearly a century by different agencies with different standards, leaving documented weak points where one section meets another. Could you imagine your town's safety depending on contractors from different decades agreeing on a blueprint they never compared? Number 34. Tennessee has a town where the local zoning code, written decades ago, technically still permits livestock within city limits in zones now occupied by suburban housing developments, meaning a new homeowner can legally end up next door to a fully permitted backyard goat operation. The town planners somehow get even lazier. Nobody updated the code, they just built around it. Number 35. Now we reach the entries where logic essentially clocks out. North Carolina has a documented stretch of interstate where two major highways briefly run concurrently, sharing the exact same physical road for several miles before splitting apart again, meaning drivers following either route are, for a stretch, technically on both. Who approved a blueprint where a road is simultaneously two different roads? Number 36. Arkansas has a town built directly across a state line, with the town hall reportedly sitting close enough to the border that residents on different sides of a single street pay taxes to and vote in two entirely different states. Would you ever live somewhere your own kitchen and bedroom answer to different governors? Number 37. Florida has roads in certain coastal counties that are now regularly underwater during routine high tides. Not storms, just ordinary lunar cycles, meaning some public infrastructure has effectively become tidal, passable twice a day and submerged the other two. Could you imagine a commute that depends on consulting a tide chart instead of a traffic app? Number 38. Georgia has a rural crossroads where 4 different counties meet at a single point, and historically, each county maintained its own quarter of the intersection to a different paving standard, meaning a driver could feel the literal road quality change beneath their tires 4 times while turning in a single circle. And somehow, we're still just scratching the surface of how uncoordinated that corner really is. Number 39. Alabama has a documented case of a bridge that was fully constructed, inspected, and essentially ready, only to sit unopened for years due to an unresolved dispute over which county was responsible for maintaining the road on either end. A finished bridge going absolutely nowhere by design. Who actually approved spending the money to build it and then just left it sitting there? Number 40. Mississippi has small towns where the original town site was abandoned after repeated flooding, and the town was rebuilt nearby under the same name, meaning 2 separate physical locations now share one name in historical records, occasionally confusing genealogists, surveyors, and the unlucky GPS user alike. The town didn't move on from its mistakes, it just moved. Number 41. South Carolina has a barrier island community where the only road in or out has been rerouted multiple times due to beach erosion, meaning the permanent road has effectively been redrawn every few years for decades, with old segments simply abandoned to the tide. This next infrastructure fail defies basic physics, considering the road itself doesn't seem to believe in staying put. Number 42. Louisiana has a stretch of swampland where the interstate was built on elevated pilings rather than solid ground, because there essentially was no solid ground to build on, resulting in one of the longest bridges in the country existing purely because building an actual road was geographically impossible. The fix wasn't smarter planning, it was refusing to put the road on the ground at all. Number 43. And finally, the entry that ties the whole list together. Tennessee has a mountain town where the elevation changes so dramatically within town limits that the local fire department maintains 2 separate stations, specifically because a single truck cannot reliably reach both ends of town in an emergency within an acceptable response time. 1 town, 2 fire departments, a single zip code that functions, for practical purposes, like 2 different towns wearing a trench coat. If that's not the unofficial mascot for the entire region's relationship with infrastructure, nothing is. So here's the honest takeaway. There's a remarkably thin line between quirky small town with character and active infrastructure emergency wearing a friendly coat of paint. None of this happened by accident exactly. It happened by decades of small, reasonable-sounding decisions nobody ever circled back to fix. It's not one bad planner. It's 100 years of nobody wanting to be the one who finally updates the map.